Hi everyone, this is the webcast on strategy execution. When we talk about strategy execution, we think about three different sets of tasks. And one of those sets of tasks is building the competencies and capabilities and resource stock that your organization needs in order to execute on the plans that you come up with appropriately. And when we talk about building that stock of competencies and resources, the way that we do that is really through three key actions. We talk about getting the people that you need to run your organization. We talk about getting the resources that you need. And we talk about matching your organizational structure to your strategy. Staffing really breaks down into four key areas of approach. So the first one is that you recruit the proper people to execute on the strategy that you've come up with. So when your organization comes up with a new strategic change initiative, one of the first things that they'll do is look for the kinds of people who are necessary to execute on that strategy appropriately. And that happens through recruiting techniques. Additionally, once people come into your organization, you'll start talking about training, and these are probably processes that you've taken part in some way, shape, or form. They're socialization techniques. Sometimes they happen by way of video or by way of a week of training in which you go to a location with the other people who've been hired into the organization in the same 6-month period, for example, and you guys sit through a variety of different speeches by different people inside the organization so that you know what's expected of you while you're there. And that training part can be key to getting the kinds of people that your organization needs to execute on its plans. Additionally, you want to keep the people who are key to your plans. And that happens by way of retaining your key personnel. You typically see stories about this in the Wall Street Journal or Business Week or Fortune Magazine when we're talking about top management team members or CEOs, where retaining that kind of leadership is incredibly key to maintaining organizational knowledge and memory. And so you'll find that sometimes when CEOs step down from the position of CEO, they'll move over to becoming the president of the board of directors. And one of the reasons that they do that is because they want to retain all that organizational knowledge. The fourth activity that's really key to staffing an organization efficiently for strategy execution is attrition. And attrition really means getting rid of the people inside your organization who are no longer helping effectively. And you can attrit people by way of firing them, but people also attrit on their own when they quit or when they retire. But an attrition activity such as layoffs or firing, those can be key to maintaining the kinds of people inside your organization who will help you to get to your goals. And on occasion, we'll find that there are people inside organizations who aren't working towards that end as effectively as they should. And so that's when attrition comes in as a staffing activity. We've talked extensively about the idea of using acquisition, merger, and partnership techniques in order to grow your organization, but this is also part of amassing the resources and capabilities inside your firm that you need to execute on strategy. So when we see firms going after diversification techniques, particularly unrelated diversification techniques, you'll see that they choose to acquire those opportunities when they can, as opposed to developing them internally, although we've talked about that as well. The access to the resources and capabilities that a firm needs to execute often comes by way of partnerships, which we've talked about. When we talk about matching structure to strategy, there are several different key structures that we see, and each of them is particularly effective for certain kinds of strategy execution, but not necessarily for others, which is why you'll sometimes see organizations go through reorganization or reorg processes when they come up with huge strategic change initiatives. So a simple structure is what you often find inside an entrepreneurial startup or a small firm. They're very top-down control kinds of organizations. We typically call them flat because you'll have one person in charge and then the rest of the organization reports to that person. This can make for a highly flexible and adaptable organization because there's only one person in charge. There's only one person to ask when things go wrong. But it can also make for a very stressed out one person who's in charge. And so there's typically a shift to another form of structure as the organization grows. And the next one that we'll talk about is called a functional structure. Alternatively, it can be called a departmental, unitary, or U-form organization. Those all involve the same terms. And what will happen in those forms of structure is that you have a siloing of the different areas of your value chain, typically, or the different functions inside your organization. And that allows you to focus on specific functional tasks, which can be really effective inside an organization that is only in one business, so those single business organizations. If you're in a multi-business organization, you'll often find that they opt for a multi-divisional structure instead. This can be called an M-form or divisional structure, but what you get that's key and different to the structure that you find in a U-form organization is that all of those functions are arrayed underneath the products or the division. Sometimes they're geographical, but the divisions that are underneath your C-suite or your president. And so you have each of the functions loaded in underneath the products that they support. And so that can really be helpful when you're arrayed across the world. When you have a highly international business, you'll often have a division that's related to each major geographic area that you're in. Alternately, if you're looking at a company like Pepsi or something like that, you can have them arrayed across the product lines that they develop. And so this way, the business level strategies decisions are centralized. And so when you need to know the answer to a question related to Diet Pepsi, or marketing for Diet Pepsi, I should say, you know where to find that person in the organizational chart. The problem is that there can be a huge siloing effect in that you have multiple people inside the organization doing the same job just for different products or different divisions. And so that can cause a lot of duplication of effort. To combat that, you'll see that people develop matrix structure organizations or composite or combination structure organizations. And these are always arrayed across these kinds of lines. Typically, you'll find functions across the top, and then you'll find projects or divisions down the side. So College of Business or colleges of business are often arrayed like this, in which you'll have the departments across the top, but you'll have undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral levels of education down the side. And so what that means then is that you have a flexible workforce that can drop into each different kind. So you can teach finance to undergraduates or to doctoral students. But you report to different team leaders for each of those areas. This is really effective for project or team-based management. It especially encourages people inside your organization to know everyone else. So when you're talking about a divisional structure, sometimes you won't find people who do the same job who even know each other. But in this format, you'll find collaboration across a wide variety because the people who teach finance on the doctoral level know the marketing, operations, and HR teachers on the doctoral level, and they know the rest of the people who teach finance on the undergraduate level. So this can be really good for cross-functional training, but it does lead to something that I like to call the Tony Danza problem, which is ultimately that when you have a question related to what it is that you do, it can often be difficult to figure out who you're supposed to ask about that. So, for example, if I teach management courses on the doctoral level and management courses on the undergraduate level, and I need some resources for a guest speaker who will speak to both classes, trying to figure out who will help me plan those resources can be very difficult because I answer to two different bosses for that question. And so that can cause organizations to become a little chaotic. Inside each of these different kinds of structures, you'll often see that there are centralized and decentralized decision-making structures. In centralized decision-making structures, you have a chain of command that is very clear. The TMT often make all of the decisions. That can be wonderful in a crisis situation because you need quick answers and there's only one place to get them. But in non-crisis situations, it takes a really long time to get the answers that you need. And your frontline managers will often feel disenfranchised because they don't get to make their own decisions. But in a decentralized structure, they could get to make their own decisions. They can have initiative that can motivate them very much. And also it's probably a pretty good match because your managers are close to the situations that they make decisions about. But that can cause problems because sometimes the information will remain inside its level, inside its managerial level. And so your TMT may not know what's happening across the entire organization. And that can also cause a siloing effect or less collaboration level effect. So each of these different kinds of structures has its pluses and its minuses, if you will, that when you come up with a new form of strategy or a strategic change initiative, like we see Microsoft going through in the first case that you read for this class, you can find that there's a structure that matches the kind of change that you're going to go through. And so that's why organizations will go through reorg processes. That's why they'll look the way that they look, is so that they have a structure that supports the kinds of strategy that they want to execute on. And that has been the webcast on amassing the capabilities and resources that you need to execute on strategy. Thank you very much for watching.